So, you run the Eurodollar University. Let's talk about the Eurodollar for a minute. The Eurodollar University, you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, and how it was a market's response to the world needing more dollars, et cetera. There's a lot of parallels, or at least people are calling parallels, of what stablecoins are about to do. I think maybe even Besant even called it that. And maybe how stablecoins are sort of like a Eurodollar moment, where it's like the markets demand dollars, and so we're going to go create dollars. Maybe not through Eurodollars now, maybe now through stablecoins. There's a lot of legislation that's being held up under this Genius Act. Specifically, I mean, it looked like it was passed and signed, and now the banks are trying to hold it up, and there's a fight over paying yield, and which could upend the whole banking system. But I guess, what is your take on stablecoins? Do you think they're the market's answer, like Eurodollars were? Do they have a chance at upending the Eurodollar?
No, not really. I think it's an extension of the Eurodollar system because it offers some of the same type of framework as the Eurodollar does, but moving a little bit, not far enough for me, but moving a little bit beyond the banking sector. There's, you just mentioned something. The banks don't want stable coins to pay yield, and they're putting up this. They're creating this disingenuous argument that if stable coins can pay yield, that'll take deposits away from the banking sector. To which I say, so what? If you can't compete with a stable coin, then maybe you deserve not to have the deposit. But
it's because the banking system is built on fractional reserve, and so then there's a duration mismatch of the deposits versus the loans they've put out, right? So doesn't it destroy the entire banking model?
It does, but is that necessarily a bad thing?
Well, no. Yeah. Well, the question wouldn't the question be answered, because you just made the case that if the private credit markets, if we lose access to credit, that impairs the economy. So if the fractional reserve banking system goes away and they can't extend credit, wouldn't that be counterintuitive, or wouldn't that be detrimental?
No, because then the stable coins and the stable coin ecosystem, if it evolves a little bit more, could therefore undertake the same intermediation process as the banks do. We don't need banks. Banks are dinosaurs. There's easily envision a future where we don't have banks. We have other different forms of intermediation and other financial needs that come about, but we don't need JP Morgan. JP Morgan is a bygone era. I'm going a little bit too far down the road, but
well, you're not at all, right? Because banks provide three main services, right? So deposits, payments, and loans. And so I don't need, if I use stablecoin, I can hold my own deposit and I can make my own payments. So
the thing is, we don't need the first one because we already run on a ledger. That's what the Eurodollar is. There's no fractional reserve system. There's no reserves. The Eurodollar system does not have reserves. The reserves are balances on other banks' balance sheets. So when you don't have deposits, then you're left with bookkeeping, which is payment processing, and intermediation, which is loan making.
Yeah.
We don't need the banks to do that.
Yeah.
You've got all these not stablecoin, you have blockchain.
Yeah.
You have blockchain technology can do the tracking of payments and do it probably a hell of a lot better and more efficiently than banks do it.
Yeah.
All you really need is some kind of intermediation, which can happen on a micro scale. You and I can do intermediation. We don't need a bank to do it. We don't need some kind of formal structure.
Yeah.
So I think on some level, the banks know it. They know that their days are numbered, and they're sort of just trying to hang on as long as they possibly can. And what needs to happen really for this to flourish is for people to realize, or people to be told, that there are benefits. Because, the immediate reaction to some new technology is, oh my God, it's scary, it's new. You're going to change the way I actually pay my bills. I'm not sure I want to do that. Am I going to get cheated? I don't have any of the safeguards that I'm used to. Once you get people used to the fact that all of those protections could be changed and they can be transferred to a new monetary system, there's really no argument left for using the system as it is. There's really no argument for the banking sector. So for me, stable coins are a step in the right direction, but they're not far enough of a step in the right direction. So maybe it's a good intermediate step before we get to the better future, but we don't need banks. We don't need them. We don't really need them at all. In fact, they're more of a drag on economic activity than not. Like you said, like we just talked about, credit intermediation has been impaired for almost 2 decades. If you got something else that could intermediate and take risk and redistribute money and credit through the economy that does it better than what we have now, it would be a huge benefit to move toward that direction. It's just getting people to understand that there would be the benefit, and therefore it'd be worth overcoming any of their personal objections.
Well, it's short-term pain for long-term gain, I would think. So
Yeah.
as somebody who believes that we should be operating more in an Austrian school of economics theory instead of Keynesian, as you you talked about earlier, and we think about the difference of commodity credit versus circulating credit. So, like, I should loan you credit or loan you money based off of my savings, not creating something artificially. So that seems to make sense to me. But the argument to that would be, well, then you slow down the economy because now we're limited on how much capital can be created, which then slows it down. So banks are creating money out of thin air, right? They're the circulating credit based off of the fractional reserve. So what you're saying is, well, we could get away from that and then just go back to like a stablecoin system that could have credit, but then that would be commodity credit, right? Or savings credit. And then again, that seems to make the most sense, and certainly long run would probably save us from the boom and bust cycle that we're in. But the argument would be, man, wouldn't that really slow things down? Okay, so I got to tell you what I've been doing with my money lately. I moved my cash over to River, and before you ask, yes, I still pay all my bills in dollars. Everything works the same, but here's the real difference. You see, River pays me 3.3% on my cash, and they pay it in Bitcoin. So my money that was just sitting there doing nothing at all in the bank, it's now stacking Bitcoin while I sleep. And I started thinking, like, my bank takes my deposits, they loan those deposits out, they make 12, 17, 24%, and they pay me 0.04%. I mean, honestly, that's kind of a shakedown when you think about it. Now, River's FDIC insured, they use full reserve, they charge no fees. So I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. So click the link down below and get $100 in Bitcoin just for getting started.
That's the natural tension. And unfortunately, I agree with you. I agree with you on a whole lot of the stuff, Mark. I think that the idea behind sound money is to eliminate the boom bust cycle. I'm not sure that it's practical. I'm not sure that the system or the free market will actually accept that, because when you look throughout history, what has happened is every time there has been an attempt to impose sound money on the system, it invents new monetary forms to try to get around it. So it seems like there is a very real downside, as you just said. When you slow down credit creation and money creation through other means, including something like commodity money, the system invents new money to try to work around it, because human nature. I think that's the real enemy here of everything. It's human nature. The boom-bust cycle is just deeply embedded in our psychology and the way we operate. And human systems always tend to lead to this boom-bust cycle.
Well, because humans are irrational, right? It's like,
well,
I love
not just that. We're irrational, but we can't see the future. We can't predict the future. And so it's because we're irrational, because we have information asymmetry, we often behave irrationally, or what looks to be irrationally in hindsight. Like I said before, subprime mortgages. If you were in the subprime mortgage market in 2004, you were not behaving according to everybody's view irrationally, because loss rates on subprime mortgages were low for years. They had just come out of the 2001 recession, and subprime mortgage default rates did not move higher. So it's understandable to an extent, but I am absolutely sympathetic to the idea that we need to at least somehow restrain or constrain to stay away from unbridled and unhindered credit and money creation, because that just leads to the wrong set of outcomes too. So for me, it's always about how do you find some kind of middle ground between those, where you don't go too far in the direction of elasticity, but you don't go too far in the other direction of inelasticity that leads to the same types of problems.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the current period that we're living in, because that's what we're experimenting with. We're experimenting with new forms of money that can potentially accomplish these goals, and do so with elegant solutions that actually do provide positive services that can lead to sustained economic growth and potential through the future.
You talk about elasticity. For everybody listening, I hosted a debate between you and Parker Lewis talking about elasticity and money. It was brilliant. Both sides of that were argued. I'll link to it in the show notes down below. It's worth a listen if you care about elasticity and money. That being said, if we go back to just like the creation of stablecoins, which I know you've been around Bitcoin for a long time, you're well aware of, stablecoins were created because back in 2015, 2016, you couldn't get dollars in and out of the crypto economy. So they created the stablecoin, and it was a market. It was a market invention to that specific need. It was kind of interesting. Now we see the government sort of wants stablecoins because maybe that keeps the dollar dominant. Maybe that because they help offset some of the treasury buying that's needed, something like that. My question is, talking about the demand from that, in the U.S. we don't really need stablecoins because we already have a stablecoin, right? Like we already have a stablecoin.
Pretty much, right?
And I don't know if the rest of the world, I don't know if their economy can pick up the slack. But it seems like to me where the demand is going to get pushed is going to be Walmart wants you to use a stable coin, and the banks want stable coins. And so it's all been so far bottom up demand. But if Walmart's paying 2.5%, swipe transaction plus 30 cents, and they can add 3 billion to their bottom line if you use a stable coin, plus they get final settlement instantly, like they're going to push that. So it seems like it's going to go that way. The banks will push it. I guess one, do you agree with that? And are you saying that is still sort of a dinosaur and that's not really innovative?
It's innovative, but not innovative enough. I'd like to detach from the banking sector entirely. And I think what happens is the genie gets out of the bottle. And so the crypto world, for lack of a better term, innovates to the next incremental stage. And everybody, the banks said, okay, we can stay on top of the stablecoin revolution because we'll be issuers of stablecoins. We'll just have money market funds that have tradable, trackable tokens attached to them. Why not do that? I mean, it keeps the banks in the game. But then the stablecoin revolution goes even further, and it starts to move away from the banking sector. So I think the issue here is the realization of the reason why the governments are getting involved is because this is what happens throughout history. Money is a bottom-up phenomenon. Political power follows the commercial system. Whatever the commercial system adopts, once it adopts it, it gets to be too widespread. Political power just, comes to grips with the fact that the monetary system has evolved in the way that it has and just makes peace with it and allows it to take place. That's what we're seeing here with stablecoins, because you're right, because for many years, especially the previous administration, the hostility to anything digital was, completely, it drove everything. To the point where it drove a lot of crypto enthusiasts just completely crazy. People who were trying to put together stablecoin projects and wanted to have some kind of, just any kind of regulatory guidance to say, how can we do this that will make you happy? And the government would come back and say, we're not going to tell you because we don't want you to be happy. So government influence is changing because of the fact that stablecoins are becoming more and more adoptive, and the commercial power is moving further and further in that direction. As you said, Mark, Walmart that starts to push stable coins is just nothing more than maybe the final confirmation that it has reached that much saturation. It becomes a real phenomenon. By then, there's nothing politicians can do but just get on board the train and just ride it to where it goes. I think where banks are making a mistake, and really I don't know if they have any other option, is to try to harness it. They tried to fight against it as long as they could, and they're still trying to fight against it even today. But now they've kind of come to the realization there is no fight. This thing is going to keep going. So the only chance that they have is to try to grab their piece of it, whatever slice they can, and manage and ride that as long as they can, and hope that it doesn't go any further. But I think it does. And eventually, before we get too much further down the road, we start eliminating some of those functions because they're really superfluous.
So you and I have spent hours discussing Bitcoin, you used to love Bitcoin. You don't love it as much as you used to love it anymore. But let's just talk about the future.
I still love Bitcoin.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you a question about this. So right now we have governments around the world trying to pass bills to buy Bitcoin. The U.S. trying to get strategic Bitcoin reserves. Obviously, Wall Street has adopted Bitcoin. Every bank is trying to get in on Bitcoin right now. We're starting to see inflows back into the ETFs. I mean, we're in a bear market, but things are turning. The question I'm asking is, I think in the future, and I think it's typically after 2030, 2040, we see medium exchange start happening in Bitcoin. And maybe after 2050, we really start to see that adoption. So I'm like decades out. Do you think that stable coins would help a sort of like natural evolution into something like Bitcoin? As Bitcoin gets bigger, volatility comes down, stable coins are sort of that gateway drug into it. You said people don't really trust the system, so stable coins sort of give them this like trusted way to start using these digital tokens, and then maybe it leads to Bitcoin in the future?
Yeah, there's definitely that possibility where stable coins could launch people into the, getting closer to the idea and make really, depending upon how it goes, the opportunity to make Bitcoin into a more useful medium. That's where you and I disagree. There's disagreement. I've never said anything bad about Bitcoin. I just disagree about whether or not it can be useful as something like a reserve currency replacement. I don't think it's usable enough. So as a medium of exchange, I don't think it gets there because of what I just said before. It's too rigid. Right now, the price is too volatile. But even if you get rid of that volatility, it's just difficult and cumbersome to use when it has fixed supply. And I think the idea of governments having reserves of Bitcoin makes it even less useful. The last thing you want is to have some kind of hostile government threaten to just throw Bitcoins out there. But I mean, that's, getting off topic there. The issue for a usable medium of exchange is always about usability. So that's where we disagree. And so, yes, stable coins attached to a Bitcoin could absolutely make Bitcoin more useful and therefore create or enhance, probably more enhance, the potential usefulness of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, which is what we really need to do. That's where the dollar needs to go. The Eurodollar is itself a pure medium of exchange. It has no store value function. In fact, store value has been completely detached and handed off to financial assets. You store your money in the stock market, and then when you get out of, or gold, you store your money in the stock market or gold. When you need the money to do something, you get out of gold or the stock market and put it back into Eurodollars and you buy something. That's how a reserve currency needs to work. But in order for that reserve currency to work, it has to be widely available and widely acceptable. Those are the two secret ingredients, and I think that's where Bitcoin can come up short. But potentially, stable coins and Bitcoin together, maybe they help solve those two equations.
Yeah, money has to be the most common traded good. It has to be saleable. You have to have enough people to buy it. I would argue that, trying to say Bitcoin hasn't achieved that in 17 years, but can't achieve it in 50 years might be a little bit short-sighted. But that being said, a lot of gold proponents. I just did a debate with Peter Schiff, so I just went through all his gold arguments. That was on
So
Zero
you
Hedge.
got all the good stuff.
Yeah, that was on Zero Hedge. But they would argue that money has to be a store of value first and a medium of exchange second. Of course, gold is not a medium of exchange, so it kind of blows a hole through that. But
I think the argument is blown up from the very beginning.
I think what you're saying is that money can be those roles could be done separately, and it is like almost. I don't think anybody thinks they should store their wealth in dollars anymore at this point, right? And even banks, even central banks, they have reserve assets and they have reserve currencies, and the assets and currencies are two different things.
Absolutely. And the thing is, store of value money, the commercial system, as it got more complicated and complex in the Industrial Revolution, has been moving away from store of value money. It has been moving toward more flexible mediums. That's not me. That's not proselytizing. That's not my opinion. That's the historical fact. And you can see why that's the case. Go back to a feudal society. You don't need a medium of exchange because there's no transactions. Transactions are done person to person. You don't need a medium in between. So you do need stores of value. So gold was a perfect store of value. Silver was actually better because those were the needs of a very simple society where.
But it was also the store value, and they would also exchange it. So it was also medium exchange. It was both those.
Because the need to exchange was also very limited. It wasn't as ubiquitous as it is to today's society. And so as we've removed to more and more of a transaction-based system, the world moved toward a more flexible, dynamic medium that could keep up with the needs of transacting. Just think about it. If you're trying to buy something from China, you can't use a store value form of money, a full-on store value money. I'm not talking about digital gold or something like that. I'm talking about if you've got paper dollars, you got to put paper dollars in an envelope and send them on the other side of the world before you get your goods. That's just cumbersome. So the system invented new ways to transact and to settle needs and do so as fast as possible across as wide a distances as possible.
Yeah.
And that led to bank ledger money because banks were the only realistic way to operate a multi-layered system with as much of a regional, it started out regional, and the Eurodollar took it to international reach as possible, where it standardized all the rules of payment needs and payment transactions and payment identification and communication, and all the stuff that needs to go into managing, the complex flows of medium of exchange. The point is that the store of value money doesn't function well under a hyper-scaled transaction-based economy. Not saying that it can't, but the world has been moving away from that kind of store of value money. So the argument that money needs to be store of value first comes from something that applied 500 years ago, not to today.
Yeah,
And that's why, again, like you said, gold has been a store of value forever, but nobody uses gold as a medium of exchange.
Yeah, yes, we agree on that. But I think what you're saying is that transaction time sped up, and so when they happened in a village, I could just hand you the gold, easy.
Right.
But now we're trading over time and space, and so in the 1500s, the only way we could scale that was a new piece of technology called the ledger and double entry accounting. And we've been on a ledger and double entry accounting since. So for 500 some years, we haven't upgraded our technology. I do think that technology changes things, and I do think it's possible to have something that's a store of value and can transact at the speed of light as well. And whether that works into the future or not, I think it will. And we have disagreements on that. But it is possible that technology could then combine that, where I could have something that could hold value, and I could also transact at the speed of light, which then solves the problem of time and space transactions.
Absolutely, 100%. I agree with you. It's a potential opportunity that could definitely work. I just think I don't think it's very likely, just because, like I said, history always moves toward a more flexible medium.
Yeah, and I think it's likely with Bitcoin.
The portfolio that performs in one economic regime can get crushed in the next. So in this free webinar, we're going to reveal what those 4 economic regimes are, how to identify them, as well as the assets, historically speaking, best positioned to perform in every environment. So reserve your seat now and learn how to prepare your portfolio before the economy shifts again.